Welcome everybody. We will be starting soon. Just waiting for Quistis and Drayst to get ready. Should just be a couple minutes here, but thank you for your patience and we'll get things kicked off.
Hey, how's it going?
All right,
Yeah,
everybody.
I like.
Oh,
Ready? When you're ready.
ready now. Welcome everybody. Those that have popped into the stream. This will just be kind of a general podcast Q&A session today with leader of VIP, Quistis, and Drayst, another veteran member of the guild. And we do have a set of prepared questions here that were submitted ahead of time by our sister guild, Ragnarok. And so if anybody has any other questions, we'll try to answer them throughout the stream or at the end of it if possible. But this is really supposed to be more of a live chat based around these topics. So that being said, we'll kick things off here. And I'm just trying to make sure that Trace, should I share my screen or are you? I probably should share my screen with you guys.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead.
There we go. So if you pop into mine,
Yep. We'll watch your screen.
I essentially
Thank
set
you
up
so
a
much.
little PowerPoint here of a handful of those questions that we got from Ragnarok ahead of time.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us. I'm glad that we're able to hop in and hopefully you can help answer some questions for the general population. And then hopefully, whenever we want to do this, we can hopefully get on and answer any more that you have.
Definitely. And for those of you in chat, just a quick sound check. Can you hear Quistis okay? I know my mic is tuned for the right volume, but can you everyone hear him as well? Just get a little confirmation from chat. I hear you just fine. I just want to make sure that the stream pops in.
I'm a rookie at this,
Yeah.
so let me know if you
No,
need me to adjust anything.
it sounds like we're good. Okay, so yeah, Quistis, I'll kind of let you drive here if you want. If you want to take a poke at this first question here. So, Truststone recommended strategy as far as the best way to build, best passive, best sets to work on in general.
Well, great. That's a wonderful question. Trust zones were introduced in late March, were 2.0, or yeah, 2.0. And then with that, it's really opened up a lot of avenues how we can look at this game, and it made it a lot more complex, and that's for the better, actually. For example, before Guild War came, we had literally just maybe 5 or 6 or 7 TMRs that got used. Now that we're able to bring back in a lot of other TMRs that were like neglected before. For example, no one probably used O's TMR sword. Now is actually pretty ubiquitous if you run Astrias, for
Definitely.
example. Of course, other things that we've been seeing it before was spells. We can sometimes make them better, but overall, I believe it's a great system. And really, depending on what you want to use this for, if this is mainly for, let's say, arena, guild wars, or guild raids, or tour, there's really going to be any way you can really tune and build in the way that's going to work best for you. But from my experience and what I will be speaking about, it's mainly going to be regarding to Guild Wars. And based on what the metas that we've seen, metas that we have probably ran by, which is Light Division, let's say now we have Water, Lightning, Earth. It really depends on basically your competitions that you see. From what VIP sees in, let's say, the top 10, let's say, basically the guilds that we would be matched up against, we've seen recently a lot fewer evade teams, but a lot more, let's say, water teams or dark teams or lightning teams even. So this is kind of where VIP has been kind of been adjusting. We used to have a lot of runes for aim or dexterity to make sure we can hit the evade teams, as we've seen before. Now we're moving toward, let's say, either AP, just in case you can get more, let's say, attacks and without, because you can't really generate on a really short map, or even agility to make sure that we're in the place at the right time before the enemy goes. So depending on what you have or what you probably should be focusing on, I should recommend you focus on either AP, agility, and an aim if you don't have aim, just because people will always run evade or maybe pop that on a surprise wall. So overall, that's my recommendation. Now, how we build things is going to be a little bit more nuanced, but I'm going to bring up something that I use personally that kind of help make things work and make things a little bit better. So it's kind of like the kind of a little bit of my work because I use a lot of Excel, but I'm going to share my screen real quickly.
Go right ahead.
Pop that out. What's my window? It's going to be this rune tracker. Yeah. Someone, if you can see my screen, there's going to be a basically a Google Doc sheet that comes out. I'm sure that other people have recreate something like this.
Yeah.
Let me know if when it pops up. So right now I think it's still loading.
It is.
So let's hopefully give that a quick second. See if it pops up.
No, I'm going to close my BlueStacks just for could be my computer dying slowly here.
Yeah, if not, I will try again. Hang on, while that loads. Give that a quick second. Share my screen. Check. Cancel. Alright, sorry, technical difficulties. Let me click on this again, see if this works.
While we're pulling that up, one thing I wanted to add to what Q was saying is that before we would used to have to think about units as here's the specific set of things that they're good at, and here's what their limitations are. And so while adding trust stones to this whole system can add a whole bunch of extra work in some senses, it also, so like what we were saying before, adds a lot of depth and nuance to how you can then essentially respec or tailor a certain unit to certain things. So you can, in some cases, compensate for certain weaknesses where in the past, if they had something that couldn't be overcome, like a certain unit being weak to, magic attacks or certain other types of attacks, if you can get them past that certain threshold, then it opens up the doors to making a lot of things work that simply weren't viable before. And so that has less to do with the specific passives that you would add to certain sets, but by way of having ways of boosting agility even further or building in AP, both of which are sets that I highly recommend, you can be less committed to certain things like, oh, I have to use bells on my main DPS, or if they're an AP hog, then that's it, which means, like what we were also saying before, you can work in a lot of really great buffs that wouldn't have been worth the trade-off before.
Absolutely. And actually, on the note, I'm surprised the passives are actually one of my favorite things, to your exact point of compensating for weaknesses, where in the past, let's say someone had an egregiously bad resistance to a certain damage type. Well, let's say minus 15% to pierce, right? Well, you had to take some kind of valuable resource, whether it was an Esper slot or an accessory slot or something, to try to mitigate that. And now, if you obviously take some time and patience and resources, but you could easily throw, let's say, 7% pierce resistance on a stone, and it may not totally negate it, but it certainly helps that, glaring weakness of the character without taking a valuable slot of an Esper, which has huge agility ramifications, stat ramifications, or same with equipment, kind of the same idea that you get a nice little middle ground sometimes.
Right, and then it also means you have a lot more gear you can try to work in because
Right.
you're not using as many of the or bound to use a lot of the same de facto options of oh well, I'm gonna always need 10 more slash resist,
Exactly.
and the only way I can get that other than those things that you mentioned would be sacrificing a specific gear slot for that. Whereas now you can do things that aren't even a passive like man eater or unit resist.
Right. Right. All right. So,
Well,
oh,
wonderful. So what ended up working was that I wasn't able to share my screen, but I did send you the exact screenshot of what I was going to share within. So if you don't mind bringing that up, Will, that'd
oh,
be
yeah,
great.
absolutely. Let me just pop that up here. So I have. Just want to open the original image. There we go. So this is the first of the two tables that you
It's
presented to me.
actually you use the second one, but this one should cover. The
Oh,
second one I actually put the titles of the
oh,
rune names. There we
there we
go.
go.
Wonderful. Yeah. So overall, as you know, and we go through in UI, it's going to be a lot of memorization, and then no brain works that well. Luckily, we have something called Excel or Google Docs. We write this stuff in. So, for example, we know what we're looking for. So right now, you'll see I have almost 6 complete sets of Agi, and you'll see how I've grouped them by aspiration, triumph, and glory. And my optimal strategy is to make them as fungible and as flexible as possible. For example, you'll see all my AP 20 or AP acquired, AP up runes. They're tied with something like Dex because they're ubiquitous. I don't have to really mix and match, and I'll always want to probably have a good combination. They won't be dead.
Right.
Luckily for these, and you typically won't see these passives on items, so you're not double dipping or you're not going to have any, let's say, yeah, redundancy. So let's say looking at the top line speed, I have AP index that can literally go on anything. Next is actually a little bit more tailored for accuracy and activation time. Now this is a little cool bit for me because with this I can put this on, let's say, a Dragoon, for example, Oberon. You can have some more accuracy if I'm not using, let's say, Alex Ring or the Marshmallow item. Or if I don't want to do that, I can put this actually on someone like Velas or any other caster that needs to reduce their cast time, attack cast time. So I believe that's a really good fungible piece. And you see for what I did for Glory was put that for mag and spell pierce resist. More spell penetration. So let's say I want to make this for Oberon instead. I would just literally grab in and attack defense one from, let's say, another node, and then drop that in, and then you know what? I'm good to go. If, let's say, I was making runes that are like activation time and slash, that wouldn't really be good for someone like Oberon. Or let's say mag and dex, because
Right.
what if I want to swap that out? It's not going to be. It's kind of a lot of trial and error, but yeah, luckily, and what we have are kind of like tools, kind of like we do in Excel. Write that down, and then you can plan. And for example, on my fifth line, I'm actually trying to finish my last set. Now, with all the runes I have, what I can do, I know exactly what I'm looking for. And for example, if I want to build another slash set, I will look for slash. And kind of with that, this is one of the great strategies. You can hopefully find some resource like this online. But overall, write it down. It's going to be really good for you.
Absolutely.
And with really good passes, as we've been seeing before, you'll see these are the things that I'd like to see. For example, I believe Will talked about healing power and how healing power 10 works additively to, let's say, barrier or TP runes on the left side for defensive runes. So those are the things I'm looking for. But overall, fungibility and basically overall use. Slash is a lot is everywhere. So that's why you see a lot more slash, let's say pierce, because that typically comes on spears that I use.
Definitely. Yeah, that was one of the, it's the kind of thing that does take some planning because it takes so many resources, not only to max the passives, but to roll and to, get things prepped ahead of time. That was one of the first mistakes I made. I said, all right, let me make a rune set for Elena. And I had, the 6 passives in general, but what I didn't do was which 2 do I want on each stone? And to your point, if you're, you want some general applicability of them on one stone. So for instance, accuracy and activation time, I'm sorry, AP and dexterity, like your very first set here, you can put that on almost anybody and it'll be just fine. I made the mistake of doing spirit penetration and slash resist penetration. Well, on that one stone, that's really good for only people that are magic scaling slash damage users. When in a perfect world, I probably would have done slash resistance penetration and the crit damage, which is on a different one. So that way, that stone you can still put on Elena, but you can also put it on anybody else and always get full use of all 6 passives at all the time. So definitely a a big hurdle when you're not planning ahead of time like this.
Yeah, and one other thing to note too is that we do typically get QOL like updates before they necessarily arrived at the same time for JP, but they do have at least two very significant things which have to do with one thing that's probably been brought up in conversations before, which is what you can transfer between and being able to overwrite what's already on a runestone.
Huge.
But then something maybe not brought up as frequently is that soon they will be bringing in like hammers as extra rewards for Arena. So, whereas in the past you may have had other reasons for doing or not doing Arena, it'll be extra incentive and resources if you reach for a certain, ranking each week.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. No, those quality of life things are going to be very handy. I've wasted a fair amount of hammers already transferring abilities when you won't need to do that in the future. You can just override or switch easier. But
yeah, I think you're in good company.
Yeah, definitely.
We all are.
Definitely. So if you want, we can we have a bunch of questions here. We can keep moving on here, and obviously a couple of them are related to Trust Stone. So I'm sure we'll come back to some of these. So this first question is one directed specifically at Quistis. I would love to know or learn more about the background of the leader. How did you get started in the game? What made you want to lead a guild? When did you know you could be competitive at number one? How did you recruit in the early days? Things of that nature. So Quistis, if you want to answer a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. More than happy to answer that. So I was not the original leader of the guild. Visipor was a guild that I found myself in. I was part of the guild that used to be Seven Sea Lions before moving to a guild called Honeybee Inn, and then now I'm all the way in Visipor. But why I like this game, why I believe so many people like this game, I believe is for the nostalgia of playing Final Fantasy Tactics. This game looks just like it, plays just like it. And honestly, when it first came out for us globally, Ramza, Sid, Afgharian, all those people came out right at that time. So it's like, wow, I think I can relive my childhood and kind of like tickle that itch. That's kind of how I got in. I was also actually 2,000 free viz away from not getting Sid and quitting the game, but they gave it to me on my last pull, so I thought I'm going. In terms of what got, moving on then, why did I want to lead a guild? I actually was not the leader. I wasn't even an officer in Visipor or any other guilds before that. What ended up happening was that, you offer, you support, you kind of go the extra mile and then just try to connect with everybody within the guild and then just make sure they're all aligned and want to do the same thing. Administrative roles, leadership roles, they're not for everybody. It's going to be like, what do you want to do? What do you see? What do you want to accomplish for the greater good of the guild or what you want to do yourself? If you want to focus on yourself, wonderful. A lot of people do that. If you want to kind of like go a little bit more, go a little bit further and kind of want to create something, end up kind of stepping out, going above and beyond, and you can become leader or an officer in the guild. And then later on, when the old leader retired, his name, so Drayst of Visipor, he retired and handed it to me. So in terms of competitiveness, we were always up and coming. We've had great people. We've had great people, tacticians, people that build and kind of coordinate. We always done things together as a group, and no one does it by himself. It takes a village. So it literally was kind of helped me out with having people right now. For example, Drayst has been very helpful to me and making sure that we've gotten a lot of things done, making sure people are on task. It's kind of one of the things that kind of makes leading easy. In terms of recruiting, there was a lot of people back then, they just didn't know what to do, or maybe just only heard of top guilds. When someone dropped out, you put a post in Discord, somebody comes in. Now, for us as Visipor, it's going to be a little bit more different now. We've been where we are, so I think people know who we are, and people do reach out to me, and then we've actually friends of friends, people we know, and other people in top guilds, sometimes they apply.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for answering all that. That's always interesting to hear about on a personal level. But yeah, then we go on to the second part here, kind of a segue from the personal question. It's more about, and this is an interesting one. It's not one that or one that I hear quite often between the subreddits and other places, but what is the optimal way to spend money in the game for fastest progression? What do you recommend as must-haves for the average light spenders, and what are some traps to avoid? I actually think it's a really good question, because as the game evolves, obviously there's a lot of benefits to packages that are available with paid Visior, things that you can speed up in terms of grinding quicker or getting access to things quicker via the paid Visior. So not one that you hear often, but yeah, good question for sure. So anybody here have any specific thoughts on that?
I can hop in, but hopefully, Drayst and Will, you can
Yeah.
hop in as well. So overall, I believe also on Reddit, we found like a price per Visio if you want to be a light spender. One of the things that kind of what really kind of propels the accounts and lets you kind of at least invest partially while maintaining like Dolphin, Minnow, or free to play, or if you, I mean, not free to play, but at least Minnow or Dolphin, it's the monthly pack for $7.99 US dollars that gives you 100 like free fizz a day and then like 500 paid fizz, I believe 490.
Right.
And overall, like value for a dollar spent, that's actually phenomenal. You're paying $8 and you're getting close to 3,500 viz over a month. So that's one of the packages that's optimal way to spend. Of course, the ubiquitous and infamous Visior Pack H or Visior Pack F, when they used to have it, is where like $24.99 gave you like 5,000 viz, or 46.99 gave you like 10,000 viz. Those are the best packages that I would look for. Sadly, they're not always there, but in terms of spending light and be optimal, I would always try to buy those packages. In terms of how much or optimal way to spend money for fast production, that is going to be a very long and deep rabbit hole, and what your appetite for spending is. If you want to get everything in the whole game, kind of like how some accounts you've seen, mine for example, sometimes you just whale out, as you would say, or spend more than you'd like to. Or if you want to, let's say, be an average light spender, you would just focus on certain elements, as I was talking about. Right. If you think of this like a collectible card game, like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, you can't go for every element and expect to do well. Everything that comes out, it's going to be pick and choose. It's not going to be as good a buffet as you would like to say. You would probably want to focus on maybe one element or two elements, basically what luck has given you or what you've been planning for, and literally hit everything up in that element so you can have all the flexibility to toggle while staying within and getting the best benefits out of, let's say, vision cards.
Definitely.
And traps to avoid, FOMO. You would literally try to avoid FOMO, because lots of good things come out. It's like someone's got on one pull, I gotta get on one pull. It's happened to all of us, but you gotta plan ahead and just kind of like RNJ says, stay strong, stay focused, and go what helps your account, not what other people you see other people pull sometimes.
It's true. The FOMO piece, I did a whole video on that at one point in terms of the gacha, where there's so many limited things in this game that the whole basis of it being limited is to, create that FOMO, that this character has the scarcity of a time to pull, and you just kind of don't always know the trickle-down effect of when they might get used. And even if they don't get great use now, there's tons of items and tons of vision cards even that, down the line suddenly have this huge impact, and you're like, well, shoot, at the time I didn't know, and you kind of get that burn once, and then you get that FOMO for the rest of it, for sure. But no, definitely in terms of the paid viz, there is obviously a bunch of different strategies, as Quistis alluded to, in terms of how much you want to spend. There's obviously a different variety of things you can spend that paid viz on. Obviously, some of the most economical that you see are when vision cards come out. They give you just a flat 2,000 paid viz, and you get that vision card guaranteed just for that amount. A lot of times, that's some of the best value you can get. Vision cards are a very big premium and have massive balance ramifications. If you can lock in that 2,000 paid viz just to secure a vision card, that's one of my favorite deals that I see pop up, as opposed to having to go a full 10 steps, or I'm sorry, full 5 steps. And then a couple other ones too. I know in the shops there tend to be those daily 60 paid viz ones. Oftentimes those daily ones, they add up in terms of giving you those rainbow turtles or certain large refills on things, and the skip tickets too are definitely one where, when you talk about fastest progression, some of the fastest progression things you can do are related to skip tickets, the affinity stage, and the JP and up stage. Those kinds of stages, when they give you the affinity keys and whatnot, those are definitely some of the best things to spend your paid viz on, because there's just so much time that it takes to get level 10 resonance with an Esper, or get level 5 resonance with a unit. And on that note, my favorite thing to spend on, unrelated to viz, is the $7.99 weekly pack that essentially doubles the rate of Esper affinity. It doubles the amount of shards you can get. I'm sorry, the number of times you can do the hard quests, and a whole bunch of other things. So there's definitely a couple things that definitely will get your progression quicker, really in those few areas. So that's something that come to mind quickly.
Yeah, and one or two things I would add to that too is, when do they offer things that you simply cannot get otherwise? So like the Trust Stone packs, there's no other way to get those shards other than at least monthly, or if an event certain, shop has them in there, like right now for the Leela quest, where they will have the UR shard tickets. Otherwise, when you get those options in, the shop, or if they offer things like you said, the skip tickets, or keys, what are the things that I cannot get otherwise simply through farming and, a certain kind of hard work.
Exactly.
So I think you brought up another really great point too, which is you kind of have to reverse the logic that you would necessarily think, which is, okay, what units do I want? What units do I need? Which kind of ties into like, oh, well, we often use JP as a roadmap, and there's reasons why that is and isn't a good, way to look at things. But I think what's more important than the units themselves, with certain exception, of course, is, what vision cards, because especially now having the option of 2 on each unit, it's going to be that much more important to not have gaps there and to really expand your options with what units you already do have. And it is a little different when they're element locked, but I think vision cards and those other resources and things like that are often just as, if not more important than, oh, I got to pull for this unit.
Absolutely. We just saw just this last week the lightning vision card that came out with the 15% agility revolutionizes what you can do with the 3 lightning characters. I mean, it's crazy how much one vision card would just suddenly change the balance of a unit, because the unit's only one piece of the team, at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah. All right, cool. Excellent. I think that was a thorough answer to that. We can move on to the third question here. So the part 1, I think it's a typo. Is Truststone debuff resistant passives and reaction block rate viable in high-end PvP? So I don't know if anyone wants to take a quick crack at those first.
Sure. So I've showed you earlier on my screen the right side of the passives. One of the passives that I do look for when I try to bank them or use them as possible is the all element and all unit resist debuff resistance. And how I can best explain what it can do is that if there's a chance that you can be hit with that debuff, this will reduce that percentage by up to 25 if you max it out. Right. So if someone, let's say Black Rose Helm, uses her limit break that says reduce Stark, resistance by 38, you can make that from, let's say, 100% down to 75. And that could change the dynamic and see if your team lives or not, just because you're not going to take 38% more damage on the next incoming hit. So if you can get that, I typically try to put those somewhere. Obviously, other good ones can be slash resist and all, maybe elements if you want to just hone in and hit a specific team. But yes, I do like the debuff resistance passives. Sadly, it does not reduce the efficacy of it, but overall, it's better than not like all the other ones. Like you don't want total resist 8 or something like that. Let's say something we heard in chat.
Yeah.
Reaction block. Now, this is kind of really tricky because it doesn't work in the way you'd think it works because of, let's say, the code. For example,
it's not like a flat rate.
Right. It's a percentage reduction of what the counter chance is.
Right.
Yeah. So if reflex 20%, if you have reaction block rate at 20, that makes it from 16%. So 4%, so 20% less chance, of course. So you go from 20 to 16. Could it affect Guild War? You'll see it when it affects you, because someone reflexes you, or Astrius uses his counter reflex that hits you and kills you before you get to hit. That can obviously sour a few people. Overall, I have built some of those. It's like, if I have something better, I'll probably put it in. But overall, chance for chance is something that you just pray to RNG gods for. Does it happen or does it not happen?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead, Drayst, please.
I was just going to say, it can seem so small, like if you're taking something that's like a 20% proc rate down to 15, 16%, or, 15, because I think certain reflexes are a little bit lower. If you take that down from 15% to like even 12%, like, okay, is all that work and resources worth like maybe a 3 to 4% difference? That can seem so small, and like I would fully agree with everything you was saying, but at the same time, like sometimes that one time will turn an entire match. Like we've all been there when, like, we were just saying Astrius kills you before you even get a chance to hit him, or Cloud gets that clutch reflex. Sometimes that tiny bit can make a difference, but I still feel like, to the greater point, it does still take a back seat to some of those other higher priority things.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I actually use both of these on a handful of my runes. The problem is they tend to be some of the last ones that I actually level up
Yeah.
because it's so hard to get the shards to level up that passive. That if you gave me a priority list in terms of like attack 20%, magic 20%, the dexterity, like when you make that list, and obviously you have 18 to 36 to more trust stones, and you have the priority of resource constraint. These ones I do think are viable. I just think that you don't get to them because you end up using your resources in more effective ways. So the debuff resistance passives I actually love on my tank trust rune sets, like when you make an HP set, and obviously there's a bunch of defense break. Like that's a pretty big way to potentially hedge how much damage your tank takes. So I like that, but again, how much can you invest in it? It's tough. So I do think they're viable. I just think
Yeah.
the practicality of it is decreased.
Yeah, and one other thing I think worth considering too is, depending on which unit you're putting them on, do they have any existing debuff resistance? Because units like Charlotte, might already get, 50 to 100%.
Right.
Like that being said, it will also stack with debuff resistances. So, you can take that otherwise, seemingly meager 25% from 100, like, okay, great. Now they still have a 75% chance of imperiling me. But, does that unit have, like, say, a 25-50% debuff resistance somewhere else? Boom. All of a sudden, you've got a 50-50 shot of that, critical debuff just not landing and changing the entire rest of the fight.
Definitely. Definitely. Yep. I completely agree. Um, okay, yeah, I think we answered that pretty thoroughly. The next one here. Also, I started the game during Final Fantasy VII. For newer players that want to be in the meta, what would you suggest picking up in the reruns coming specifically for Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy Tactics? Any thoughts there in terms of characters or vision cards that get rerun in either of those collaborations?
So going back to my original point, if you start during Final Fantasy VII, hopefully you picked up Cloud, everyone picked up Tifa, if you may have gotten Aerith or Barrett. It really depends on what the rest of your count looks like. But since Final Fantasy X on the rerun gives you Yuna who is light, Tidus who is water, and then Auron who is ice. If you have some of the pair of those existing units you got from FF7, that'd be great. Overall, let's say if you came from FF7, you probably have lock and all. Definitely light would probably be a stronger element for you because you would typically can put up lock with Yuna and then hopefully use the other units like let's say Starlight Elena, Jaden if you pick them up on the pole, or Angoper who's available to everybody. So overall, I think light and Fail 4 would be a good pickup for you. Is Fail 4 really needed for high end Guild Wars? I'd say no, but overall, anything you can just get your hands on for an element, I would just get it just in case that it may come into play down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. From a character perspective, I'll be honest, I don't know if any of them stick out to me other than maybe Agrias. That she does look to be a very strong unit, particularly for Ice, which is missing. The rest of them, although they are getting some Mastery 2 upgrades, I don't know how prevalent their usage is. So, from a pulling perspective, would think Agrias would be one of the premium out of both Tactics and 10, particularly because Tactics, Ramza doesn't have much usage and much of anything. Orlando seems to be getting power crept by some of the other Lightning units that are similar. Delita, I could cry about him on stream, but I'll hold back my tears for now. There's the characters are good, but I don't know if they're must pulls. To me, though, the vision cards, absolutely. Both of these, we talk about them being a premium. These collaborations have some fantastic vision cards that definitely worth pulling on if you have the opportunity to. So those are the ones I'd really look out for in particular, more so even than just the characters.
Yeah, underappreciated Esper and VC, especially for high level PvE content, would be Red Chocobo.
Yeah, Red Chocobo.
And otherwise, I would completely agree with what you both were saying. And, particularly when it comes to the FFT characters, I would say Agrias, bar none. Sid's going to be good, the way I see it. But, again, like we were also mentioning, somewhat redundant, at least so far, seemingly, with other lightning slashers.
Right.
Now granted, if you don't say have some of those, then he can fill that role. But otherwise, like once we get that FF10 rerun, which should be very soon, probably within the next like 2 weeks or so, Valifor, great, not probably needed. Titus can actually be really useful for certain PvE. Otherwise, like Auron, don't worry about it. Yuna, still an amazing support unit, but not what she once was.
Right.
And then otherwise it just kind of depends on what your account has.
Totally. Yeah, no, completely agreed. I think we all make good points there. So, all right, excellent. We'll keep moving along here. We're about halfway through, so I know we originally said half an hour to 45 minutes. I don't know about you guys. I have all the time in the world, though, so if we want to be thorough and cover
Yeah,
all
I
these...
got time.
Cool. All right, awesome. This next one. So, I'd like to know mathematically, are TP stones and AP stones both good use for AP? I want to use agility stones on the right side, but need to do some AP management. No one seems to talk TP stones. So this is an interesting one. I don't know. Anyone have any strong feelings they want to start with?
So you will. The
Yeah.
numbers
Okay.
I haven't gotten into. I think you have so.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I could definitely talk to them. So at the very least, on the right side, I'm sorry, I think this is specifically for the TP. So for gentle reminder, those of you the TP set bonus here will increase when you use three of them together, increase your total TP by 10% and the acquired AP of 25% to self. Out of all the Truststone runes, this set bonus tends to get talked about the least. I actually think it's for good reason. I don't want to say this is bad. It's so immensely niche, though. I just don't think that most people will ever take advantage of it. So so the TP you get 10% off, and then theoretically, looking at UR stones in particular, each stone will give you 10 extra TP. So you'll get 10 from each stone. That's a total of 30. And then you'll also get the 10% of your character's base TP. Now, the thing with TP is it's non-replenishable once the battle starts. Not like AP where you can regenerate it via basic attacks and using TP skills. So there's some characters, Resnick in particular, does tend to run out of TP, so there is a case for why you want to build into that. But I just don't think the acquired AP for those characters tends to get any value whatsoever. And so, if you think of a support character that's going to be spamming a lot of TP skills, well, while they do so, every TP skill they cast, they're going to take half of that cost back as AP. And if you think of who typically uses TP skills, well, it's your supports, which are magic oriented, which means they already have massive amounts of AP to start the battle, so they don't need any more. Or it's your tanks that are really using a lot of TP skills to kind of buff themselves up. So there is, I think, a situation where maybe there could be like a tank that's a pseudo DPS that really needs a lot of AP. And the ones that come to mind are characters like Dwayne and King Mon. Unfortunately, I don't think they're viable for a lot of PvP at the moment. So they're the best examples, but I don't think they're good investments. So to me, like, I could see that being a case where characters that use a lot of TP but also need the AP, it's only a small handful of those characters. And although it's nice to get extra TP for those characters that require it, I don't think it's a significant difference, and definitely not strong enough to overcome the need for either the HP set or the defense spirit or luck sets. Like, to me, the value you get from any of these other four definitely exceeds the TP. So I think there's other ways to get that AP if you want it. For instance, on the right side here, I think this AP Truststone set, as we saw with Quistis' setup of runes, this is a highly valuable one for DPS. I've talked about it. There's also acquired AP of 20% on the passive that you can put here, so you can also get additional AP that way. So I think there's some other ways than just this set bonus to achieve that goal. So overall, very, very niche. I personally don't know a place yet where I think it's the best choice. So yeah, I don't know if anyone
That
else...
said,
Yeah.
if I do see TP up 4, I'll use it. Definitely for healers and supports. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Make a whole set of it. Maybe if I got actually anything to spare, sometimes I just roll them just to swap them. But
I'm actually glad
really
I thank you for bringing that up. I actually forgot that entirely. There is a increased TP 10% passive, so that if that really is something that you're need just a little bit extra of, I do think that's a viable passive to roll and level up without having to dedicate your whole set bonus to it. So thank you for bringing that up. I forgot about that. Yeah. All right.
No worries, thanks.
Any other thoughts on that, or think that covers it?
No, I think you really covered a good point that they're somewhat counterintuitive for the vast majority of units. So it's like they will potentially have their spot, but you're just making too many other compromises.
Right. So cool, excellent. All right, keep moving along here. What are some of the most underrated TMRs to build with Truststones or hidden gem TMRs? Is there any that come to mind that may have seen a resurgence? I know you mentioned O's Katana earlier as one of them. Any others that you think?
Yeah, weapons for sure.
I'm trying to go through my list right now, trying to think of what people see or don't see a lot of. Before light evade, I mean with lock, you would actually still see lock using Vistral's dagger.
Yeah.
So that came back for one. The other thing you could use is obviously Lock's own TMR, the bandana, and that's also a good come up. Typically, yeah, it's mainly going to be weapons for the fact that if there were like a UR TMR, you've probably seen some play right now.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a couple. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. You go ahead. I'm still forming my thought here.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, as far as like certain specific weapons, Vistral's dagger, because even though the Dark Eater, and I think you mentioned this in a recent video, but even though the Dark Eater, I guess, unless Dark does make a resurgence with certain things, isn't gonna be very applicable in of itself, but it has like a really great evade stat, and then it opens up, those other two slots for things that, can expand your options with, whichever unit you're throwing that on, like Locke or Leela. And then otherwise, you've got ones like Dario's TMR, which increases AP Gen by another 25. Now, granted, you could have an AP rune that would be redundant with that, but on a tank, you can kind of switch things around so that they can use something else. And then a lot of those weapons will have these really sneaky great passives. I think another one, like that, was reused back in the day that, I think is underappreciated is ones like Gaff's sword. Like if you can just have your tank land confusion with an auto hit, or, like there's other ones, I think Nasha's does like immobilize. You can sneak in some really great things like that, or even, Marial's has spirit down. So if you think outside the box a little bit, and throw things on, especially with units that you might be using them on that don't necessarily need to do a ton of damage, then sneaking in status ailments and debuffs like that can bring an extra edge that otherwise the person who you're attacking wouldn't have even have necessarily thought to try to counter against in the first place, because they're like, oh well, if I'm building this defensive team to block, say, lightning attackers or earth attackers, here's the things that they have in their toolkit. Like Oberon has X, Y, and Z, Noctis has these things. They're not necessarily going to think like, oh, they're going to be able to confuse me or something like that.
Right. No, absolutely. The weapons definitely saw a resurgence. I don't think there are any other underrated TMRs specific to trust stones, because when you think about trust stones, they're you can put them on any TMR. It's not like there's trust stones that are armor only or
Right.
weapon only. So to that degree, like the value of the TMR is still what it has for innate stats. So if you want hyper agility, there's some TMRs that offer that. If you want ones that have high extra attack, there's ones that offer that. Ones that have obviously abilities that are the best abilities for your character. Like I don't think the trust stone changes the value of those TMRs in particular, because you can take that same trust stone stat and literally put it on any TMR at the end of the day. It's not like it's unique to certain kinds of them. So yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. All right, cool. Move on to the next question here. So I think a lot in here could benefit on advice for attacking in guild battle. General advice about that, how to consider first and second attacks, and best ways to prepare. So I'll let Quistis, if you want to lead that one off, because I know that is something that we do emphasize on strategically.
I was actually going to say this needs to be his own stream. I
Yeah.
don't think I can cover this with
Yeah.
any sort of, let's say, I can't do it justice in like 2 minutes. But I will give you my elevator speech on this. Literally, I would say is plan for what you've seen in your level of tier of Guild War. For example, we look at what our enemies are running on offense and defense. That's the way to prep for it, and then try to either prepare and be very certain you can clear one or two teams off your teams fresh, or making sure that whatever people are running aren't going to clear you. So that's the best way to win. Obviously, either have a really strong defense or really strong offense, or sometimes both. That said, there are so many nuances, so many strategies and tactics I've seen come and go. I can share a little bit more hours probably on a different stream, but because
Sure.
it's just gonna, I don't have that kind of time to do
Yeah,
that right now.
yeah. No, I do have one small point I'd like to talk about, if you don't mind, related to this, that brought more to my attention as of late, just seeing how we approach it philosophically. The thing about Guild Wars that everyone needs to do when you're really trying to really be competitive and win as a guild, you can't think selfishly. You have to think the numbers from the macro full guild perspective. So a lot of people will say, oh, I want to get 6 stars and that's my goal. And so they pick 2 of the best targets that they think that they can beat, and bam, they get the 6 stars and they pat themselves on the shoulder and I did great, and if we're not winning, it's everyone else's fault. When realistically, there needs to be a bigger macro perspective where, sure, there might be 2 perfect targets for you, but you also need to consider like the other people that are attacking. If you take 2 targets targets that, maybe there's other good characters or good comps that you could have attacked instead. You might be hurting one of your teammates that now that you've taken their 2 good ones also, they're now going to stump because they don't have any good ones left. And so sure, you might have gotten 6 stars, but you might be actively hurting your other teammates in terms of what they have for options when they want to attack. And that's a big thing to keep in mind. A lot of times too, you say, oh, I want more than just the 3 stars, the 4 stars, so I'm going to go open this person and give it a shot. When realistically, when you just got to kind of play it safe and think to the bigger level, if I can clear this one team, that's still value in that. I think it's a big adjustment that a lot of people don't consider. It's a hard one to think about too, particularly when you think about how much you invest in the game, like money, resources, time, that no one wants to sit there and just be happy getting 3 stars or just like scrapping 2 easy teams. You don't feel good about that considering the work you put in, but when you want to win, like that's a really important part of the offensive philosophy, I think.
Yeah, we all want to be like 6-star champs and, the MVP who got like double fresh. But, one of the things we'll say is like a team 5 is better than, any other 6. Because, especially if everybody's approaching it from that mentality, then you're going to be seeing a lot, better success overall. And I think if it's okay to like kind of take this in a different direction slightly. I think from a building perspective, the, best way I think to approach it is a little bit backwards again, kind of like in a similar way of what we were saying with like, what do I spend on? It's like, okay, well, how do I flip this on its head? Because the normal way of thinking about like, okay, what should my team be is like, okay, well, what units are the strongest right now? Or, in some cases, just like, what do I want to use the most? Which is, of course, like, given why we're all ultimately doing this, you don't want to always just be sacrificing your own enjoyment. But I think the best place to start in terms of, what do I use is not from the unit kind of side of things where to start, but rather like, okay, well, what's the map? And not just in terms of the bonuses, which are always a huge factor, or at least almost always, but also like the terrain, like, are there weird heights, like how quickly, each team going to engage each other. So like, for example, when we were on that, castle interior map, it was complete like speed rush because you have essentially no time to buff whatsoever. So using that as an example, it's like, okay, well, what units are going to be the most effective, from a speed standpoint, but also with very little time to ramp up and be, able to win on very little runway in that sense. So thinking about it from the map and the bonuses, and then also I'd say that being kind of one of the first primary points, but then also what is everybody else going to run? Because in some sense, I think it's actually kind of fun to use the things that not everybody else is using, but, there's reasons why they get used so widely in the first place too. But, like if realistically what your opponents are going to be using, you can then kind of tailor like, okay, if let's say when it was Light Vade or, when it was now like a lot of cases being like the, Astrius, Celeste, Velis team. It's like, if that's going to constitute the majority of your targets, then, without, as a guild, leaving yourself too many blind spots, you can kind of then look at what you've got in your account and think like, okay, even if I'm not even thinking about this from an elemental perspective, like what units do I have ready to go and strongest that I can tailor to that approach, or, like which ones out of what I have are going to be best for that, and then start there. So kind of thinking about it backwards in a certain way.
Totally. And to your point on the map, that's one of the biggest things I struggle with when I do my character reviews. And I always try to emphasize that the character itself doesn't really mean much. The map has such a big influence on what they do, not only from the topography, as you mentioned, in terms of like how many turns you get, the spacing, but even what the map buffs are. If I do an Astrius review and for 3 weeks after, the map effect is agility up 20% for water units, well, that's got nothing to do with my evaluation of Astrius, as a character. And so you might see a meta, but that's really like map driven more so even than character driven. So that's something that when I think about way ahead in the future, I don't know all the maps that JP does. And I think there have been a couple where they've had some tweaks and alterations in the order and the buffs. It's really hard to plan out, which characters are going to be best when so much of what makes them good is the map itself. And I, to know that ahead of time is very difficult. Yeah. So.
But overall, I'd say we come back to this, can go through examples of what Visipor uses. We can definitely spend an hour on this and kind of go through the nuances.
Definitely.
We could do a whole stream just on that.
Yeah. We have like a whole if-then statement of like what to approach and how for the best odds and what's best for the guild. Yeah. So, all right, excellent. We'll go on to the next one here. So, things to consider when deciding on what to pull. I know it's extremely specific to each account, but I would think there's some general rules of thumb that could be given out both to those already at a competitive level and those who are trying to get to that point. I think we did cover this a little bit earlier in terms of pulling, where you were, Quistis, you were talking about, leaning into strengths of what you already have, built. I think real quickly, because I'll let you talk to more about this. I think one of the more important things here, when you are talking from the perspective of a competitive guild, is that should be some kind of group decision as well when deciding on what to pull on. Where we talk about making macros, and that concept of macro is, how many optimally 25 or more of the same team can you put on a defense as a guild. And so that's not a me decision, that's a guild decision. And so I think there's it's an underrated aspect when deciding on what to pull. It's not just what you want, it also needs to factor in what the guild wants to do, and I think that probably has a bigger impact to some degree as well. So I don't know if anyone else has any specific thoughts that we haven't talked about on that.
100%. I totally agree with you. Basically, what Visible and other guilds do, there are certain set units that they would use and they can run, so they can rely on it and build and tailor a defense without having to say, oh, well, this person doesn't have this unit, I need to build something for this person. It's easier when everyone has that unit, so you can just make one template, everyone can run it, and then get that as streamlined and make the process as wonderful and simple as possible.
Definitely.
Overall, yeah, that said, if you have a certain guild that runs a certain motif or meta, try to follow it as much as you can if you'd like. If not, then it could be for something else that you can use to augment, as what Drayst and Will was talking about earlier. If there's a weakness that your guild can't handle, maybe you're that person that kind of, kind of fills in that niche. For example, if you're looking at a basketball team, not everyone can be center, not everyone can be Steph Curry, not everyone can be a point guard, not everyone can be a shooting guard. You need a good mix of everything to make sure that you can handle everything.
Totally.
Overall, and
don't skip any VCs.
Yeah,
don't skip any VCs ever.
I would literally call this game War of the Vision cards and not War of the Visions for that reason. With 6 slots, you can have so much more nuances and in-depth customization that one card alone can change the whole fight.
It's very creative. I like that. War of the Vision cards. It's the truth. I love it. It's true. It's true. So, all right, excellent. That brings us to our last pre-planned question here, and we'll obviously see what we have time for. And if there's anything else you want to touch upon. When do you stop re-rolling stats on Trust Stones? It's easy to stop at maxing a single stat, but sometimes there are multiple stats that can be relevant for the unit. So what I believe they're referencing to here is on each of the Trust Stones, there is the substats that each one has. Let me get my screen in order here. So there's a set of substats here, and the in-game ability is called Temper, and essentially it's an RNG factor that just re-rolls what that substat is for 3 attributes. So for instance, the Eye Stones have substats of HP, TP, and Crit Evade, and then the J Stone has substats of HP, TP, and Evade. And I think this question is, when do you decide on stopping, when to re-roll on these? So I do have some general thoughts on that, but if anyone wants to take this first as well.
When you start losing your sanity.
That's a definite hard stop. Yeah.
Right. Overall, if Gil isn't a limitation, makes it only like 100k per roll, look for the things that you'd think would make your character stronger or what's lacking. Each unit is different. They don't all have the same amount of AP or TP or attack. Let's say a unit is really short on, let's say, TP, like for example, like Titus. I would literally try to focus more of my rolls towards TP because he casts Haste Dog, he casts Cheer, he's out, he's done. For units that have a lot like a healer, you may not need as much because they may not burn through them. So it really depends on the unit, what you're trying to use them for. But overall, if you want to stack up max attack or magic, it's a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, we love seeing the big numbers when we look at our team comp and they're like, oh my god, that adds up to 4,000 to 6,000, some crazy thing. We all love seeing that stat stack, but I think that really also brings up a really good point when it comes to things like TP and AP, where you're not going to get that from anything else. Your weapon, depending on how you spec certain things, or if it has an attack or mag passive on it, it's is that 20 attack, give or take, really gonna be a make or break? It can be, but I would say more often than not, if you're able to give yourself just enough AP that your DPS gets an extra attack in, that's going to matter way more than, did they do another 200 damage with that attack?
Totally. No, I think my personal threshold for these when I'm rolling is if I can get to roughly 80% of the amount, I'm happy with that. Like if I'm rolling for HP, I don't need to hit 160. If I get 140, I'm pretty happy with that. Like 20 HP, if you add it over the 3 stones, adds up to a little bit, but I don't think that's a make or break when you consider just the amount of money it would take and the odds of actually landing it. There are a couple that I think are really hard definites to max out depending on what you're doing for certain characters. So, for instance, the J stone here offers evade. Well, to me, if you're putting this trust stone on an evasion character, it's imperative to get all 8, in my opinion, of the evade. 7's probably fine too. Let's be realistic, but the difference between 5 and 8, that 3% over 3 stones, or I'm sorry, it's only just the J stone that gets it. But the point is that there are certain stats on here that deserve to be maxed, and I would emphasize the ones that do. If you have a character that really depends on critical hit rate, this T-stone here, you can get a crit rate up to 10% extra chance to do it. Like that's one that I would focus on trying to get as close to max. Whereas, the difference between 8 dexterity and 14 dexterity, when you're already over 500 dexterity for the character, really isn't all that impactful. But that's kind of where I pick and choose. And the same thing for like attack and magic. You typically have stones that are skewed for one kind of character or the other. So I think there's just a healthy balance of getting to roughly 80% of the way there on just like maybe 2 or 3 of the attributes. I don't think all 3 or 4 being maxed is not only not necessary, but I also don't think it's realistic. I think the odds of actually landing that are extremely difficult with not enough payoff for how much time and cost it actually takes to do so.
Yeah, actually, the way I've re-rolled quite a few of these, I actually think they're weighted. Like, literally, each value has a percentage weight to it. So you can't, let's say, if you rolled like 1,000,000 times, you'll get like a perfect score in all of them. I don't think that's possible.
Oh,
Every time I've seen my hit point goes up, the other 2 go down. I don't think, based on that,
I don't doubt it.
I could be wrong.
No, I've seen the same.
I'm sure that's right. Yeah. I feel like that's true.
I've never gone a perfect roll on any of the 3 stats. I always assumed it was that I gave up too early, but you totally could be right too. It might just not be feasible in the game either. So I could definitely see that being the case. So, yeah, that's kind of my thought in a nutshell. So, all right, so that is technically all we had prepared for questions ahead of time. Was there anything that you might have heard through the Discords that I didn't catch in setting this up in terms of questions, or things that you thought also deserve some extra attention?
Yeah. I can't see your Discord screen. I'm actually not on Discord. I'm just making feedback.
Oh, got it.
Overall,
check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got all the questions from the Ragnarok topics wish list. There was a bunch of questions in the School of Visiport channel, but I think we personally answered those ad hoc as they came up. Nope. Anything in chat that you think they wanted elaborated on, or I think this is a wide variety of stuff to talk about already.
I think we should parking lot the other piece for Guild War. We can go over that in more detail. We can come back with some strategies, or some pictures and diagrams and all that. So
yeah, for a follow-up, I like it. Actually, and this is perfect. It's been an hour. Probably a good idea to call it an hour. We could probably talk for hours, but we also got to get ready for Guild War here too, and move on with our Saturdays because it is the weekend. So cool. All right. Well, I'll end up calling things here then. In that case, very special thanks. I was gonna say thank you for joining. This is
thank you.
Your idea here, and I think it's a great idea. This is something that I don't think enough content creators in particular do, because there is a lot to be said for being able to collaborate with a couple different people, talk about things real time instead of me just in an echo chamber with a PowerPoint presentation. So thank you so much, both of you, for your time today, and to the viewers, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this is insightful, and we'll look forward to doing something similar like this again real soon. So I'll let you guys sign off.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Luck with Guild Battle Day.
That's right. Good luck, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.